All right, so welcome class. I thought today we'd take a little second to watch this first episode of this anime called Cells at Work on Netflix. Um, I certainly recommend you guys watching it. It has a lot to do with the circulatory system and the immune system, at least the first episode does. So I'm just going to play it and I'm going to comment on a couple things and just tie it back to the anatomy and physiology that we learned. It's astounding how much anatomy and physiology is hidden inside this, or sorry, not so much anatomy, mostly just physiology and microbiology is hidden inside of this, and it's interesting. Yeah, so here we go. I'll play it and I'll pause it and talk about various parts of it.
約37兆2000億個もの細胞たちが今日も元気に働いている。
So right away, if you notice the tree that they were at, and the guy was sweeping outside, it said dendrite. So I guess in the human body here, trees are dendrites, which is funny because dendrite means tree branch, or it means trees, and a dendrite, we haven't done the neurology module yet, but the dendrite is the kind of branches that extend from a neuron. So they decide to make dendrites trees because that's what the name means. So obviously the red blood cells is carrying oxygen because they carry oxygen and carbon dioxide. All right, so here are the vascular endothelial cells. I'm assuming it's these little things flying up here, maybe. I guess that the floor that it's busting through is made up of cells as well. In this case, it's vascular endothelial, and we know that endothelial is the lining on the inside of veins and blood vessels. And one of the portals of entry for pathogens, specifically like bacteria and things like that, is a puncture wound of some kind, or an abrasion or a cut or anything that breaks the integrity of the skin. In this case, the integrity of the blood vessels. So whatever's going in the body, whatever pathogen is going to get inside the blood in this case. Okay, so the other portals of entry, like mucus, through mucous membranes or through inhalation or through the digestive system or whatever, this is not the case. This is obviously some kind of injury that happened to the person. And that's why he says here, whoa, the vascular endothelial cells, because it's actually puncturing through them. So this is a reference to how pathogens like the conditions inside the human body, and that's why they go there. Kind of funny, he's stained in blood. So like, what's this blood made of? Are there even like smaller cells inside these cells that are also have their own world? Anyways, all right, this is cool. So he's a white blood cell, which obviously is a disease fighting immunological cell, and he's in the neutrophil division. So we learned that there's several blood cells that are part of non-specific immunity, right? Innate immunity. Neutrophils and natural killer cells are the big ones. Or sorry, neutrophils and natural killer cells are the big ones. Macrophages as well. And neutrophils are usually, we learned, the first on the scene, right? Neutrophils get there first, and then usually the macrophages will come a little bit later. They're a little bit bigger, a little bit more powerful because they can, ingest huge chunks. But this is kind of cool. So the very first one on the scene was in fact a neutrophil.
侵入した細菌の駆除完了。白血球、外部から体内に侵入した細菌やウイルスなどの異物の排除が主な仕事。好中球は血液中の白血球の半数以上を占める。いいか、細菌は一匹も逃がすな。一匹でも逃げたら大変なことになるからな。うわ、白血球だ。本当、容赦ねえな。血まみれじゃん。そっちいたか。いない。これが白血球。おい、何見てる。何か用か。はい、いや、助けてくれてありがとうございます。危ないところを。礼はいい。仕事をしただけだ。いや、まあ、どういたしまして。はい。そっちもういないか。ぶっ殺す。とにかくぶっ殺す。うわー。
This is really how infections happen, right? The neutrophils will go in and try to clean up the area, but sometimes they can't get everything. And so you end up having some bacteria that survive and they make it past the initial, where the initial wound was, and they start circulating the blood, or they start going to other places in the body, which seems to be what's happening here. So now she has a box of CO2. So she delivered oxygen to the person at the beginning. Now she got the CO2 because that's waste and she's bringing it back. So it appears that she's a maid. At least I think that's what's going on here, and that makes sense because it's in the spleen. And so we learned that the spleen in the cardiology module, we learned that the spleen, oh no, sorry, in the lymphatic and immune system module, we learned that the spleen is what really kind of cleans up a lot of the worn out blood cells, and as well as just, you know, carries on an immune response, but it's kind of like the bit of the filter of the circulatory system, along with the kidneys, of course. So that's why she's a maid, because she's cleaning it. So so no red blood cells are allowed in the lymphatic duct because we learned that lymph fluid usually doesn't carry plasma proteins. They're too big to usually leave the circulatory system, and so that's why lymph doesn't have usually many plasma proteins. If they do, that usually indicates a problem. And so here she is trying to go in the lymphatic duct, and she's not allowed because she's a red blood cell. So much little things hidden in here. It's crazy. So she's got CO2, which is waste. So I guess this is where she's going.
すみません。
Some bacteria can have capsules, More on that later.
さっきはどうも。
はい、どうも。お前さっきの赤血球か。
はい、今の最近は。
さっき入ってきた奴らの生き残りだ。まずいことになった。奴は肺炎球菌だ。早く殺さなければ分裂が始まってしまう。そうなってはこの世界が。
So that's all, really true. Pneumococcus is a bacteria, usually is one of the bacteria that's responsible potentially for pneumonia. And, they start to reproduce as soon as they're in the body. So the body has to kill them quickly.
肺炎球菌？
ああ、肺炎球菌ってやつは肺炎などを引き起こす呼吸器病原細菌で胸膜を持つ毒性の強い菌だ。
そうだ、私今肺に行こうと。
ここ腎臓だけど。
迷子なんです。
危ないのは肺だけじゃない。菌が血管の中に逃げたんだからな。
どういうていうか全然ほどけてませんよ。
肺炎球菌が引き起こす病気は肺炎だけじゃない。肺炎球菌菌血症という病気があるんだ。肺炎球菌が血管を巡って各臓器を襲撃し。
So bacteremia, bacteria or the first part of the word, bacter for bacteria, and emia for blood, so bacteria in the blood, which is of course dangerous. You don't want that. So that's what's happening here. Because remember how he said, "Oh, he escaped into the blood stream." So the guy's now, this pathogen is now circulating in the blood stream, which is very, very dangerous. Yeah, and it can cause meningitis and everything.
24時間程度で全身を侵略することもある。
そんな病気が。
ああ、今この体免疫力が低下してるからな。いつもなら
So this person's immune has been compromised.
e01 番侵入した細菌の追跡応援を頼む。
All right, so this is a really cool little plot, twist. This body is apparently immunocompromised. So we were just looking at that in this module a lot. Different reasons that people are immunocompromised. Could be a disease. They could be on immunosuppressive medication. They could have maybe HIV. And so we don't know why this person's immunocompromised. It could just be lack of sleep, stress, improper eating, lifestyle habits. But for whatever reason, they're kind of using that as a plot point that they're short-handed, which is really what actually happens in an immunocompromised person, right? The person's immune system isn't able to respond to threats like this appropriately because they just don't have the resources to mount an actual defense. So it's a really cool way of representing it.
これはレセプターが反応している。まだ近くにいるらしいな。
So remember we learned about chemotaxis, how cells are drawn to the pathogens. That's what that little detector is doing for him.
そいつも迷子か。
多分。
まあいい。肺だな。わかった。
私も行かなきゃ。肺炎球菌怖いけど。 それが仕事。
肺はこっち。じゃあついてこいよ。
So back in the dendritic cells.
すみま
せん。Dendrite for tree, so they're trees.
急ぐぞ。道覚えてけよ。
はい。すごいところ通るんですね。
まあな。こっちだ。
こんにちは。
血小板が。あら、
かわいい。血小板って言うんですか？
ああ。
こんにちは。お疲れ様です。こんにちは。
お疲れさん。
すいません。
Sorry, I was gonna read that. I missed it here.
血小板が。 お疲れさん。
Right, so we know that the platelets are responsible for clotting, creating platelet plugs, and so obviously there's been a kind of a bit of a wound, or an artery or capillary or whatever has been damaged, and so the platelets are here fixing it.
この先まだ工事中なんです。
通行止め急ぐんだが。
何かあったの？ごめんなさい。あのね、トラブルで工事が遅れてるの。それでね、運送係さんが致命的なミスをしちゃってね。
And the platelets are tiny because, if you remember, platelets actually fragment from really, really huge cells, and then all the little fragments are the platelets, and they're actually small, the smallest of the blood system cells. And they're trying to get calcium because calcium is one of the clotting factors.
じゃあやってやるよ。
お忙しいところすみません。肺炎球菌見なかった？こんなの。わかんない。
しかしおかしいな。いや、レセプターがさっきから妙な反応をしている。
本当だ。壊れちゃったんですかね。
ボロボロだからな。参ったな。特にこれといっておかしいところは。
こちらヘルパー T 細胞。肺炎球菌が血管内を逃走中との連絡が入りました。これよりキラー T 細胞。
Alright, so this is the helper T cell speaking. So remember we learned about the helper T cells. There's two types of T cells, helper T cells, cytotoxic T cells. The helper T cells are the ones who usually stay in their lymph node or spleen or whatever. They stay in the lymphatic organs, and they will create, complement systems and other things. They help to trigger co-stimulation. So basically they help the immune system do their job, and they help the cytotoxic T cells carry on cell-mediated immunity. And so that's why he's sitting up here. He's not down doing the fighting. He's just a helper T cells. And then he says we're mobilizing killer T cells, which I'm almost certain is this anime's term for cytotoxic T cells. And you'll see why in a second. So he's mobilizing cytotoxic T cells, and cytotoxic T cells are adapted immunity, so they are specific to a pathogen. So unlike this white blood cells, this neutrophil, the cytotoxic T cells or the killer T cells are going to be specifically made to destroy this pneumococcus that they're dealing with.
我々リンパ球の精鋭部隊が向かうからには心配無用です。我々の誇りにかけて必ずや抹殺してご覧に入れましょう。
ヘルパー T 司令。
え？
おやつに食べたクッキーの粉が口元に。
あ、マジだ。やっべ。いや、まあそういうことで。
来たか。
So of course they're coming out of the lymphatic vessel because we know that the lymph nodes are where they'd probably be created. So that's very true. There's just another type of white blood cells. Or not a type of white blood cell, they're related.
ずいぶんのんきな顔してるじゃねえか。これから殺されるかもって時によ。いや、のんきっつうか知らないんだろ。じゃあここで一つ賢くなっていか。肺炎球菌は栄養要求性が高い。
Okay, this is getting into some really, really deep biology. Hemolytic cells. So hemo means blood, and lytic or lysis means destruction of. So hemolytic means it destroys red blood cells. So the pneumococci is a hemolytic. We mean a hemolytic cell, meaning that they will target and destroy red blood cells. So that's why he's saying to her, he's coming after you, you're gonna die.
つまり栄養分を運んでるてめえら赤血球がターゲットになるんだよ。せいぜい気をつけるこったな。怖がらせたいだけだ。気にすんな。時間がないから行くぞ。
うわ、ここが肺ですか？
ああ、 まだどこも騒ぎになってないな。
追い抜いちゃったんですかね、肺炎球菌。
じゃあここでお別れだな。お疲れさん。
はい、案内してくれてありがとうございました。
ああ、気をつけてな。
お疲れ様です。
あ
ありがとうございました。
あ、あ
お疲れ様です。
あ、前見て歩きなされ。さて、どうしたもんか。レセプターが使えないとなると。これは。
必ず見つけ出せ。はい、引き続き逃亡した細菌の捜索を続けます。一体どこに消えやがった、肺炎球菌の野郎。
右肺、左肺。乗ります。毛細血管を通って。
Right, so we haven't really done the respiratory system yet, but in the respiratory system, the alveolus are the little sacs where the blood capillaries carrying deoxygenated blood will undergo gas exchange to get the oxygen from the air, right? So she has to pass through capillaries.
こっちも？あっちも？毛細血管がいっぱい。ちょっとあんた。
There are a lot of capillaries.
ここで何やってるの？しっかりやってる？助けてください。は？どれどれ？ほら、そういう時はここ見るの。番号が書いてあるでしょ？はい。扉にも同じ番号が書いてあるの。本当だ。すみません。相変わらずみたいね。でもまあ、新人のうちに一個ずつ覚えていけばいいから。はい。頑張って。じゃあね。ありがとうございました。95、96。お、ここだ。へえ。
So this is a little joke because remember how we learned that red blood cells are, the shape they are, kind of like that donut shaped, and partly is because it, or one of the reasons is because it's able to kind of fold on itself and get into really small spaces, because sometimes the capillaries it goes through are actually smaller than the cells themselves, and the cells have to really squash and kind of fold in on themselves. So by saying here, be curious only one at a time, is because in capillaries, only one red blood cell at a time can get through.
マナーを守って一人ずつね。ここが肺胞かな。肺炎球菌どこに行ったんだろう。出くわさなければいいけど。
Love how you can hear like a fan blowing, like it's actually part of respiration. So this I'm actually not really sure. And if any of you students want to do a little bit of extra research and figure out if there's any significance to him hiding in carbon dioxide, as far as I know, but bacteria don't hide in carbon dioxide or bind to carbon dioxide to get around. But maybe I'm wrong. So yeah, if you can figure that out, maybe it's just for the story, or maybe there is a significance to it.
自分が何を運んでるか気づかないなんてな。せっかく肺胞まで来たんだ。栄養分を運ぶ赤血球を待ち伏せするにはいいところだしな。まずは腹ごしらえといくか。
誰か。
うわあ、栄養分いっぱい運んでるね。
省庁の方に寄ったから。
Right, so apart from carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide, blood cells will carry other blood will carry other nutrients, and I like how in this show they represent that by actually carrying food around to people.
それで仲間をかばったつもりか。無駄なことしやがるぜ。大量虐殺の前だというのによ。助けを呼んだっていいんだぜ別に。そうやって血管を塞いでちゃ助けにも来れねえだろ。
殺される。
強不足だな。俺たち白血球は郵送といって血管の壁をすり抜けて敵のところへ行くことができるんだ。
This is a cool little reference of what blood cells can do.
赤血球から離れた途端レセプターの反応が消えたんでな。まさかとは思ったが赤血球の荷物の中に隠れていたとは。
ここまで来て殺されてたまるか。
白血球さん、あいつ栄養分を運ぶ赤血球を襲うって。
分かった。
お前でいいや、ぶっ殺せ。最近だ。
下がってろ。胸膜か。
So, if you remember way back in the public health module, we learned about different types of bacteria and how some bacteria are capsulated. So they have a capsule, meaning they're a lot tougher. So this cell, or this bacteria, is a capsulated bacteria.
さっきの目くらまし音は違う。直接縦に使うより強力な膜だ。ここまで強力だと接近戦じゃ手が出せん。
白血球さん、教えちゃダメです。
なるほどな、いいこと聞いたぜ。予定変更だ。全身侵略の前にてめえらを殴り殺しにしてやる。
なんてことを教えちゃうんですか。
すまん。
もうダメだ。白血球さん、私みたいなアホに構わず逃げてください。
あれを使うか。そっちへ走れ。
こっち。
行け。
So the bronchial tubes, of course, are the tubes that go to the lungs, to and from.
ちょろちょろ逃げ回りやがって。どうした白血球さんよ。
赤血球、もう少し下がれ。
はい。
降参か。撃つてなしか。あっけねえな。俺の仲間を皆殺しにしたくせによ。お前らに同じ目に遭ってもらうぜ。
細菌の捕獲に成功しました。これより細菌を排除します。
おい、待て、なんでこれ。
さてと、
聞けや。
無駄だ。そのカプセルは内側からは絶対に壊せん。そしてここは機関士だ。その意味がわかるか。
てめえなんだそりゃ。こんな手使って恥ずかしくねえの。
So, I'm sure you see where this is going. This bacteria obviously got trapped in mucus.
別に。
嘘つけ、目をそらすな。
赤血球。
くら仕方してんじゃねえぞ。てめえこの野郎、ふざけんじゃねえ。
お前も何か飲むか。
じゃあ同じの。
はい、お茶。
どうもありがとうございます。
うわ、なんでこれ。うわ。
こっちで一緒に見よう。
So many other little references. I don't even have time to get them all.
さあな、どこだと思う。
まさか。
ここは機関士だ。
まさか。
So this rocket's called Sneeze 1. So he got sneezed out.
さてと。
もう行っちゃうんですか。
ああ、 仕事があるからな。
白血球さん、また会えますか？
いや、白血球つってもいっぱいいるわけだし。
そういえば赤血球はもっといっぱいいるんでした。
そうだな。まあ同じ世界で働いてるんだ。いつか会えるさ。またな。
はい。
事件最近だ。近いぞ。ぶっ殺せ。ぶっ殺すんだ。
じゃあお疲れ様です。
死ねこの雑菌が。
All right. So yeah, so that's it. A couple of, I guess, inconsistencies. I believe that the cytotoxic T cells were on site a little bit too fast. I mean, we don't know how long it all took for this episode to happen, but it seemed like it was only a matter of minutes really, because she had she exchanged the package and she was on her way when the cytotoxic T cells showed up. Anyways, they would usually take a little bit longer to fully differentiate and proliferate. But anyways, apart from that, it's an extremely biologically correct show. At least the first episode is. So anyways, if you guys really like this and you want to see more and you want me to do other episodes, I can definitely do that. I'm not sure what the next episodes are going to be like, but if it continues in this same theme, it's quite informative. It's almost like Magic School Bus, but a little bit more adult. All right, so that's it. Thanks for watching.